Hey folks, my name's Nicholas. I'm from Play on Tabletop. We do highly edited battle reports. 40K in 40 minutes is what we're known for. And today we got to do something kind of exciting. For people interested in 40K as a game, the new edition of 40K is right around the corner. And Games Workshop approached us of being able to interview Stu, one of the members of the design team for 10th edition 40K. It was a cool opportunity that we've never really gotten before. When 9th edition came around, our channel had really just started and was just getting going. And so we didn't know a lot of people. We didn't know any of the other content creators. We definitely didn't know anybody at Games Workshop. So we were kind of scrambling around in the dark, trying to guess at what was coming up in 9th edition. So the fact that we're at a place where we actually get to ask questions of Games Workshop itself is kind of cool. We didn't have unlimited time. I have a billion questions about what's coming up, why they did things, how they did things. But a really core tenet here at PlayOn is we want to inspire people to play. And when new people enter the hobby, that's amazing for us. We love reading comments of someone seeing one of our battle reports or our how-to videos and saying, you got me into 40K, I now have this hobby because of you. That's humbling and very cool. Everything we've seen from 10th edition seems to indicate a much more approachable game. Currently in 9th edition, there's lots of abilities that stack and are from multiple sources, and there's sometimes confusing jargon, and the same rule can be reiterated in several different names that really just do the same thing. And so for someone viewing that isn't really intimately involved with the game, it's hard to follow. I'm really looking forward to being able to say one thing and mean the same thing for every single army. Things like Feel No Pain is back, and Deep Strike. I'm really excited to be able to even say those words because we've had to strike them from our jargon at the studio here, and sometimes when someone says Deep Strike or Feel No Pain, someone immediately says, nope, there is no Deep Strike in this game. I'm excited it's back. It'll just make it that much easier to explain what's going on and for someone watching to actually understand what's going on in the game. But more so than that, we play a lot of 40K here, and just by the necessity of making games, we have to play a lot of armies. There's a bit of a meme going on that I am no longer Taunik, I'm Gardnik, Eldarnik, Taunik, Tyrannik, Genik, because I've played several armies on the channel. But that's just kind of the necessity. We all kind of have to play several armies. But if the rules are more accessible, that means I can play more of them well. Because there's nothing worse than the feeling that I'm not playing an army well enough for the viewers and I'm letting you guys down. Another thing I'm really excited about is the fact that everything's going back to indexes. I know some people are kind of upset that the current 9th edition codexes are being thrown out, and yes, it is a little sad that some armies like the Astra Militarum and the World Eaters only just got their codexes and have to throw them out. I understand that, I get it, I empathize. But I remember when indexes first came at the beginning of 8th edition, and I loved that time. It was like the Wild West of 40K. No one knew how anything worked. No one knew what was the best combo or the best weapon. So everyone was just throwing something at the wall, see what sticks, and it was a ton of fun. I remember going to my first tournament of 8th edition and just being, no one knows what's going to work, so let's just try things. I saw zany lists that were trying new things and finding new combos and finding new ways to build lists, play the game, and finding what worked. I'm excited to try that again for 10th. So we got to sit down with Stu from Games Workshop. He was able to talk to us about some of the design philosophy behind 10th edition and how it's going to affect new players and people just approaching the game. Hello.
Hi Nick, how you doing? I don't think we've met before. Nice to meet you. Yeah, so hi. So I'm Stu. I'm the 40K studio manager here at Games Workshop. So I have the privilege of looking after our team of games designers, artists, writers, graphic designers, photographers, who make all of our books, all of our codexes and rule books. I oversaw the project for the new edition.
Well, I've got a couple questions for you I was hoping you can answer, and we can talk about a little bit. One thing we've noticed specifically is that it looks like it has a great approach for new people to the hobby or people just approaching 40K. Can we expect a similar approach when we see the codexes come in later in the year?
So yes, so the idea of simplified, not simple, was one of our design goals, and we looked at that all the way through the process. So both looking at the core game design itself and the indexes that we've worked on, There's about 2,000 data sheets, I think, across the different indexes. So all across that project and then rolling through into the codex design themselves. That was one of the things that we looked at and kind of was one of our yardsticks almost for what we've measured against. So the codexes will definitely be a continuation of that that you'll have seen from the indexes.
For someone getting into the game for the first time right now, especially because there's multiple, in 9th edition, there's multiple copies of a codex, for instance, multiple copies of the data sheet. How are we going to keep this straight? Like, is there going to be any way to easily differentiate between an updated data sheet or an old one or an old codex?
Great question. So the indexes themselves will be available for download, so they'll be on the website, and also available through the new 40k app. And the 40k app will always be true. So if anyone's ever unsure about what the latest thing is, the new completely redesigned new 40k app will always be a source of truth. And then when we move into codex land, the codexes will always be more up to date than the indexes. And there'll be some visual cues. So if you have some data cards from a codex or data cards from an index, they're actually different size, so slightly different sizes, and there's quite a lot of visual kind of design cues. So it'll always be easy to see the most up-to-date version of that. But like I say, the easiest way for players to check will be check the 40k app. It will be the source of truth.
That's really encouraging to hear. I'm very excited to hear that. I like that very much. in your opinion, your experience with, I guess, I'm assuming you've played it as well. How easy is it in 10th compared to previous editions to pick up the game? And can you give us an example of what simplified, not simple, actually means?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of different ones, I guess. So the fact that we have some core universal special rules kind of help give a common language. Ironically, some of that language has survived the death of universal special rules in previous editions. So an awful lot of people who started playing 40k in the last 6-7 years still refer to things as feel no pain and infiltrate, even though those just aren't actually rules in the current edition of 40k at all. They're like hangovers from the past. So there's that shared kind of number of universal special rules, and I think they're quite a good example of that that approach that we've taken. If we have too many, if there's like 150 universal special rules, then no one can remember any of them. They effectively become a barrier. If there's too few of them, then they're not actually serving the purpose of being a common language between players. So we really tried to find like a balance of the right kind of size of that pool to be able to achieve the goal that we wanted. In terms of like beginners, I think that shared language really helps. I think we've also got some great jumping on points with the new edition, particularly Combat Patrol. So Combat Patrol has been designed as with two goals in mind, really. One is accessibility. So players who have never played Warhammer before, want to get involved in 40k. Combat Patrol deliberately lowers the kind of mental barrier to entry, as well as the size of the army that you're collecting. So the combat patrols themselves are written with all of the kind of decisions baked in. Yeah. So one of the things we realised is that there's quite a lot of decisions that a player makes when playing Warhammer that you can't make until you understand. So you might have chosen your faction, great, you chose that because you thought it looked cool, you've built an army. Which weapons you give your guys, well, it kind of depends on what you want to do with them, but you can't know that until you've played a bunch of games and know how. So you kind of, there's like a loop that you can get stuck a little bit in where you're not really sure of what to do. You need to pick a warlord trait for your warlord, and you're like, well, which one shall I have? I don't really know, and I might get it wrong. And so a lot of what we've tried to do with Combat Patrol is bake those choices in. So you already have an enhancement that you use. You already have a secondary objective chosen for you. So it's a much more accessible way to get in. There's still choice. You can effectively toggle the default off and choose a different thing, but like a load of the choices are made for you as a new player straight away. And then I think the last thing that helps make it more accessible for newer players is the fact that we put the emphasis back onto the datasheet and the models. So in previous editions, sometimes units did unexpected things because of a combination of a stratagem and a particular character rule that they had from an aura and an army special rule that all kind of stacked up to mean that maybe a unit did a thing that it was kind of a gotcha, you didn't really expect it. And what we've worked quite hard on with the new data sheets is the majority of the kind of power or ability of a unit is captured in that data sheet. So it's much easier to kind of look at an opposing, either their data sheet or just the models themselves, and kind of get a good read on how powerful that thing is going to be and what kinds of things it's likely to do. are much more driven by the miniatures themselves. So again, just makes it more accessible because you don't have to try and figure out what 2,000 different data sheets might do. You can effectively look at your opponent's army and go, I reckon the big tanky thing probably is going to shoot me. And it will, right? So it's much more closely tied to the kind of physicality of the model and its background.
I love that. I'm actually really, really excited for that. Well, you actually started answering my next question, which was about Combat Patrol, but I do have some more questions about Combat Patrol, because Combat Patrol, to me personally, is one of the things I'm most excited about 10th edition. The concept of being able to throw it on with a friend quickly and explore any army I want really easily. Like, I feel like everything I've seen makes me feel like I can approach pretty much any army in the game, even if I don't normally play them, and be able to at least try it. But I actually am really curious, are there any plans to expand that system down the road? Different combat patrols for armies or different abilities? Because I can imagine eventually it might get a little stale if you play a lot of combat patrol. And another thing I have concerns about Combat Patrol, because I like the idea, it feels really hard to keep balanced. Is there any intent? How are you going to keep that balance if something suddenly shows up once you have millions of people playing, where something is really out of whack?
Yeah, so a couple of great questions in there. So the first one, which is about expanding Combat Patrol. So one of the things we want to be able to do in the future is add new combat patrols in. So probably when Codexes appear for a particular faction, we might introduce a new combat patrol. Okay. So there's a Tau combat patrol on launch, but maybe when we get to the Tau Codex, we'll do a new combat patrol, which again gives a bit of variety. And we'll try and make sure when we do that those two combat patrols give a different play experience. So that if you really love Tau, that's your jam. You've got a choice of different combat patrols that you can field. And they actually give you a choice on the tabletop. So I don't know, maybe one's a little bit more mobile, one's a bit more shooty focused. So that will help with that kind of. If Combat Patrol is the space that you play most of your games in, we'll keep the game fresh through introducing new combat patrols. One of the things we're quite conscious of is trying to get the balance right between keeping Combat Patrol accessible and adding loads of things to it that then kind of start to degrade what it's for in the first place. So from a balance point of view, Combat Patrol is probably our most tested product because we're really, really conscious that we don't want to balance it after the fact. Now, if we need to, we'll always do the right thing for the player base, but that accessibility kind of means you don't really want to be in a place where we say it's really easy, you pick a combat patrol, those are your rules, apart from they're not because there's a thing. Do you know what I mean? So we really want to keep it nice and simple and straightforward. So we're really trying to front load all of that that balancing and that play testing within Combat Patrol to make sure that we don't need to do that. And some of it is there's a lot less levers in Combat Patrol because it is a little bit simplified in terms of the number of abilities units have, the number of interactions. You have less stratagems to choose from, less units on the board. So the number of interactions is several orders of magnitude smaller than a game of 40k. So we're pretty confident that we can actually keep it balanced enough for the experience that we're trying to create with Combat Patrol. But of course, if we'll deal with things if they pop up. But the intent is to maintain that kind of simplicity and that accessibility. And I think if we do too much outside of the game itself around that, it starts to degrade kind of like the strength of Combat Patrol.
Yeah. Oh, that's really encouraging to hear. I want that to be true. So I'm really wanting to see that. So that's awesome. I really just have one last question. It's more of a fun question. Around the studio, we have some gaming superstitions. Like personally, myself, if my miniature is not pointing at the miniature it's shooting at, I find I roll worse. Do you have any personal gaming superstitions yourself?
Yeah. So probably all of them. I don't think they're superstitions, aren't they? Aren't they just fact? So you should never like roll to hit with a missile because why would you? I always make sure exactly it's a rocket, right? Never say anything but a 1. I always drill my gun barrels out because otherwise how do the bullets get out? It seems pretty obvious to me. And you always have to paint the eyes because otherwise your guys can't see. And if your dudes can't see, they can't shoot properly. So, but I don't think they're superstitions. I think they're just fact.
There we go. I subscribe to that. Well, thank you very much, Stu, for the opportunity to talk to you and to give some insight. I'm I'm actually really excited for 10th, and I'm excited for the possibilities of what this new edition might go. It's really invigorated my love for this hobby. So thank you for all the work you guys and your team has done. I'm looking forward to seeing everything that's coming out.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Stu. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. It's really interesting to hear behind someone that actually is doing the designing. It does feel like there's a lot of intentionality behind a lot of the decisions, which I'm encouraged to hear. I want to see that. I want this game to be healthy. I liked hearing, for instance, that Combat Patrol they're going to be really careful with and not just releasing a bunch of stuff that suddenly throws the balance out of whack, and that they've play tested that part of the game more than any other part. I want to see that succeed. So I'm encouraged by what he said there. Aside from Combat Patrol, when the new Codexes come out, that's going to be the real test. Were they able to achieve that maintaining of simplified but not simple, not as much complexity? Were they able to rein in design choices so that the game doesn't get away from them? With a game as massive and complex as 40K, with something like 2,000 data sheets to balance, that is not an easy thing to do, and I don't envy them that job. It does sound like they're putting in the effort to do so. I like the new design philosophy. I'm encouraged by it. I'm cautiously optimistic. And mostly, I just want to play the game now. If there's anything that interview and all the previews of 10th edition have done, it's really made me and the studio at large really excited to play games of 40K. I can't wait to throw some dice. I think it's time for the Tau to arise and assert their dominance upon the galaxy. Also, some of my other fellow content creators from Mini Wargaming, Vanguard Tactics, Tabletop Titans, all got a chance to interview Stu as well, so go check them out.
But I won't be needing this anymore. Hey, Nick!
Thanks, Lawrence. Not sure what I'm going to do with that. Appreciate that. But I'm going to pass this off to Adrian from Tabletop Titans, who you should check out for their section of the interview, where they got to ask Stu some really great questions. Adrian, here's a great gift for you. 9th edition Codex, so useful. From all of us here at the Play On Studio, take care and play on.